First of all, I'll just add my hi and thanks for coming, and thanks, Carolyn, for doing this with me. So I just remember how many times I ended up in heated debates because I heard from whoever the hiring manager was, we need to hire another Ray, we need to hire another Barb, we need to hire another, and there was just, and no, we don't, we need to hire this kind of a person. And so there were just all these like heated debates around like, okay, first of all, we need to hire fast, and we need to do this, and we need to somehow, where's the cloning machine, and Candace, get out your magic wand. And there was this pressure, and often it got pretty heated. And part of the solutions that I just found so much relief around are the things that we're talking about today. The role that benchmarking can play in terms of settling some of the conversations, letting some data to speak, rather than it just being like, who's the loudest voice in the room or who's got the most authority. And it provides just awesome opportunities and ways of us shaking up our processes, but also enabling us to move faster and better.
Awesome. Okay, so some quick agreements before we get started. Give me a thumbs up if you're looking at webinar agreements and not my calendar. Great, that's a good start. So a couple of quick agreements. Ideally, we'd love to see your videos on. Please put your microphones on mute. There's a few that aren't on mute. So if you guys wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. It just helps with the background noise. We recommend having a pen and paper close by. Like, the work that we do is really driven by wanting to create change and transformation. And if you guys can walk away with one tiny little nugget or new thing to think about, then that we think we've done a good job. That's a win. So have your piece of paper and pen close by. If you have a question, put it in the chat. We'll do our best to answer it at the end, but I think maybe today you might have to wait till a phone call or send us an email. And we will be recording this. This will be going online, just so you know. So it's for sort of like educational purposes. Now, Candace and I sort of debated with whether or not we wanted to throw you into a breakout room. And I think because of time, Candace, we might skip it. Bringing people together is a core value of mine. I love it when your brains connect with each other and talk. But unfortunately, I think we're going to be a bit short on time today for that. So I want to create a bit of discussion here to kick us off. So my questions for you are, in the chat, can you put in what city are you calling in from? What called you to participate today? And what do you know about benchmarking? Are you using it? What do you think about it? Do you have any wins to share from using it? Like anything. So in the chat, just say, what city are you calling in from today? What called you to participate? Even if it's like Erica saying, Nikki told me to be on the call. And then what do you know about benchmarking? Are you using it? So pop that into your chat, and let's just quickly do a little bit of a get to know you here. So Brianne, Kelowna, awesome.
I'm in Kelowna too, Brianne.
I was going to say, are you two connected? Do you guys know each other? I don't think we
are. No, but Candace, maybe we need to be.
Yeah,
well, that's what I'm thinking.
Oh, is Gail in Kelowna too?
There we go.
Okay.
All right.
We just need a place to meet. Let's make it happen.
Send me the details. I'll be there.
Perfect. I love this. North Van, Kelowna, Richmond, all over. Roll a new structure for the company. Is that you, Pam, that said that? No, Pam Turner. Okay. Rolling out a new structure. That's fantastic. This is the key time to be thinking about that. Used benchmark in the past and found it very useful. Is that Christy? Awesome, Christy. Great. Heartland, there's some honesty. I just say, Heartland, we're doing this thing, you should show up. So yes, he's probably one of my most steadiest participants. I appreciate the support. Okay, awesome. So a tiny bit of experience with benchmarking. Erica Lee, strength of benchmarking. Just checking in here. Awesome. Let's check in maybe with Gail and Christy. What are you guys noticing? Why are you guys curious about benchmarking right now? put you on the spot like that?
Well, in particular, we work in our company is partially tech. We're in health data. So it seems to us that salaries are sort of skyrocketing in certain areas. And so we really just wanted to make sure that we were being competitive, and yeah.
Awesome.
So please feel free to add to that.
All competitive, and then as well being cognizant of the public sector, which is the other half of our house that we often recruit from. And there's a very big gap between the two. So making sure that there's equality within the team is also challenging. Yeah. So these are things that, again, when we saw the topic come up, we're like, oh my goodness, this would be very helpful.
Great.
Especially with what's happening.
Great. Kenny, have you used benchmarking before? I'm going to put you on the spot.
No, actually. And so it's a great question. Our business over the last 3 or 4 years has gone through lots of evolution. And so things that we sort of were touchstones in the past with regards to things we knew that we could rely on, that were data driven, have very much changed. Now we are in a different space. We're software as a service, high tech. And that means to me that many of those things that we used to do don't hold water anymore. So we need to kind of go back to the drawing board. And again, we're experiencing similar issues with intense pressure in some spaces. And we're also very mindful about equity and maintaining an equitable approach. So very similar comments actually to those that were made by the previous person.
Awesome. Well, I just want to share the concept of benchmarking showed up for me when I was doing my MBA, my final management project. That was a heavy lift. If any of you guys have talked, I've heard me talk before, I often refer to it, but this idea of really using the data of humans to help us define a role and hire for the right fit was a strong message that was coming through as a key part of any hiring process. And so fast forward today, what am I seeing in the workplace is like every single one of my clients is hiring right now. And that like the coaching work, the consulting work that we're doing is around finding people to service the work. And my fear is that when we are in this sort of scarcity of people state, we are quick to hire. And that we move away from like our core values and cultural fit and sort of assessing the best candidate towards like that anybody will do solution. And my argument is like, well, that might feel like a short-term relief. In the long term, it's terrible, because it takes you guys away from the work that you need to be doing, because typically you're the one responsible to find that next person. You're managing chaos, you're managing roles and situations that didn't work out properly. It really moves you away from doing that important work to back into the urgent category to finding that hire. And so that's why this topic I find so interesting, is that it really allows us to, or when done right, it forces us to slow down and say, what is it exactly that we're looking for? What are the values best associated with this role in our organization? Do they match? What's the education and the experience required of this role? But what are the behavioral attributes, the driving forces, the core competencies required of this role? So it's a really much more holistic approach to ensuring that you've got the right fit. So that's what we're here to talk about today. What is benchmarking? Why does it matter? What's the cost of a bad hire? That's just sort of a fun little a template that I'm going to share with you guys. And what could a process look like? All right. So this benchmarking process is sort of starts under the assumption that you've already created the job description. I mean, I would argue 9 out of 10 companies have job descriptions for the role. But that next step is taking that job description and really mapping out specifically what this person will do. I like to say, if this role could talk, What would it tell you about the key accountabilities, the key results, the behaviors, the driving forces, the core competencies, the values that are required? So this is much more of an internal document than an external document. We're going to get into that a little bit more down the road. The next step is creating the benchmark. Like I say, let's create the unicorn, because that's a whole other story, but let's create the unicorn. Like if there were no constraints on this role, what would this ideal candidate look like? Then we conduct the screen and we do the interview. Once we sort of do that screen and we have like our top 3 to 5 candidates, we send them an assessment link to do the assessment. Then we would run a comparison report and we choose who we think best fits the role. Now, remember, a point that I really want to hit home is that this benchmarking process, the use of an assessment tool, is really only 30% of your decision making. Okay, I really need to hammer that home. The other 60% is, does the person have the education and experience that we need? And are their values aligned with ours? So this selection process is not fully rooted in the use of a behavior assessment tool and a benchmarking comparison report. Once we hire the person, we run a Gaap report. That Gaap report then becomes a part of their professional development goals, or what I like to call a personalized performance management plan, which is not an improvement plan. This is like their playbook. This is their playbook to like launch into your organization. So this is the little framework that we've got. This is the circle from start to finish. This is what we are going to be walking through today.
And so, Carolyn, just could you go back to that slide just for a sec?
Sure.
And so I just want to speak to, so Gail and Christy, when you were talking about like salaries, so, you know, many of us have heard about or are thinking about the importance of compensation benchmarking. And so, which is a specific kind of benchmarking. And so if you're familiar with that process, then there are similarities in this process as well. So I just wanted to call that out. So, you know, in the case of compensation benchmarking, you would start with the job description. You'd figure out like, you know, definitely like what are the need to haves, what are the must haves, what does this person do? And then in terms of creating the benchmarking, you're doing market analysis, right? And so there are a lot of similarities to the process of compensation benchmarking if you're familiar with that process. Okay, back to you, Carolyn.
No, that's good, because I do think it's important to clarify the difference. Like one, you're evaluating different information, and you know, like you said, the process is similar, but with the compensation, you're just evaluating different information.
Yeah.
But what we're here to talk about really today is using this as a part of your hiring process to make sure that you're getting the right candidate for the right role, because not anybody will do. So why do we pitch benchmarking? It's because when we can ensure that we've got the right people in the right roles, we're going to drive engagement. When we know what motivates them, what's important to them. Like I literally just sat down yesterday with 2 employees and was like, what's important to you? What's important to you? When we know what's important, we can play in that space and we can talk in that language. And when people are driven, sort of when their motivators are engaged, then they are engaged. We can avoid bad hires. Fun little fact, I did a team debrief last week and the leader said to the team, well, I just want us to be a bit more innovative. And I looked at him and I was like, this is not an innovative team. Like this isn't what you've hired here. This team will like right size the ship and like create a wicked amount of standard operating procedures, but this isn't your innovative team. So we want to make sure that we are getting the right people for the work that you're wanting to do, whether it be the role or whether it be the role of the team. We want to make sure you're making the right hires. We can reduce biases by just simply looking at the data of their assessments. And this essentially helps us start to develop our talent pipeline. So cost of a bad hire. I'm going to send you this fun little form. I literally just had another conversation last week with a client who's like, so-and-so wants me to hire this person. We just need people. And I was like, look, take this form to that person and walk through it. And why don't you slow down for a second and realize how much speeding this decision right now is going to cost you in the long haul. So I'm sure that this is not new information for you, but I do think if you are in that position where you're feeling that pressure to make the hire, this is a really great tool to share and walk through to make sure we're all on board and we're not making a mistake. So key to this assessment, many of you have worked with me and know that we use this DNA assessment tool in our business. It is central to this benchmarking process. And so if you have already worked with me, this is fantastic. It's just another way for you to use the tool. But essentially we use it to help us create that muse, that ideal candidate that we're looking for. And so the assessment measures DISC, our behaviors, how we show up, our driving forces, what motivates us, and then core competencies. Now, core competencies is the one place in this assessment which can be strengthened over time. Typically, DISC and driving forces don't change, but core competencies is a really great, important place in your hiring process to say, what are the top 3 to 5 core competencies required of the role? Does this candidate meet those requirements? And is this the place where we start in our coaching and professional development work? Okay, so the assessment is central to this whole process. And the assessment we know accelerates and improves good hiring. We can use it for coaching. We can use it for leadership development. We can use it for team building, performance management. We can even do sales versions of it to help any sales teams get stronger. So here's this deeper dive into the process. Candice, why don't you take us through this little slide here, step 1 and 2.
Sure. So, so the first step, I mean, you know, most of us probably have that job description, but we need to understand when was the job description written, and we need to make sure that it accurately captures, you know, who it is that we're trying to hire. And so, you know, what we recommend is to get some subject matter experts. Get some people who have been doing the job really well, who are really, really knowledgeable about the role. This also has the added benefit of engaging your current staff. And so, and giving them, you know, input and opportunity to contribute to the future of the company. And also share some of their mastery. And so, you know, we want to take that job description, but we want to take that as an opportunity to engage.
Awesome.
And also to get some feedback.
Yeah. Now, once we've got the job descriptions, we've got the subject matter experts, this is this template that I was talking about. This is if the job could talk, this is what it would tell us. And as important as making the right hire and getting the right hire, getting the right bum in the seat, I would argue this step in the benchmarking process is probably the second most powerful step, the second most important. The first is like making the right hire. But this is important because it's like aligning leaders, aligning the people that know the role or work with the role to make sure that they are clear on what we are looking for. Are we looking for a team of innovators, or are we looking for a group of people who can write standard operating procedures? They're 2 different skill sets. They're 2 different behavioral profiles. And so creating that alignment of stakeholders early on creates clarity around why we're hiring this role, why does it matter, why is it important, and what is it going to mean for me? And as we all know, one of my favorite authors, Brene Brown, says, clarity is kind, right, Pam? I just saw a big grin out of you, so I'm calling on you. So this clarity up front is just like, this is honestly such a massive part of this process. Okay, so next step. Candice, do you want to talk to this?
Sure. So, what Carolyn has been referencing is this assessment tool and the role that an assessment can provide in helping with creating the benchmark. And so, so the way that we do it at Better Your Best is there's a link that is sent through, and people have the opportunity to contribute what can go into the creation of this unicorn, or this like ideal candidate. We need to then complete the accountabilities template, which Carolyn just described, and And then we also look at the DISC and driving forces and core competencies, which are all resources that are going to be provided, Carolyn, I think, for people who attend the webinar. Yeah, and so together, we pull together our people that we engage, those subject matter experts, the ones who are going to be working with this new person, the ones who are going to be supervising this person, the ones who are going to be the ones who care about this person being the best hire possible. And we pull together all these pieces and have this conversation before we talk to candidates. This is super important that that we have this conversation, going back to one of the whys, which is that this process helps to mitigate risks of bias. So the clearer we get from a data and from our conversations and from these accountabilities templates and the things that we're looking for, then that helps to get us all on the same page with what we're looking for before we start meeting candidates and we go, but I liked her better and I liked him better and or them better, like, and so it helps us to really get set up for success before we head into those interview processes. Did I miss anything, Carolyn?
Well, really what I want to hit home, like, I think we just sort of echoed what each other was saying, but that once we pull that information together, it all gets married into creating your own unique online unicorn benchmark assessment. Now, I use the word unicorn because we always want this like super amazing candidate for the role, but this allows you to combine everybody's thoughts and feelings to really come up with that one profile that becomes the unicorn by which you measure everybody against. Okay, I just want to make sure that that step in the process is really clear. We use the online tool to create your own custom, unique benchmark unicorn report. Okay. So we've got the report, then it's back over to you to screen and do the screening. And we're not going to go deep into that because I'm sure you guys all have your own processes and methodologies. But once you start screening and you've whittled down to, let's say, 3 to 5 candidates, then we send them the talent insights or the TriMetrix DNA link. We send them your own unique link for them to complete. That candidate completes the assessment link. And then we start running comparison reports. Now, the comparison reports can actually compare up to 5 candidates. I don't know if the screen shows very well, but in that bottom right-hand corner, you can see that goal achievement, which was one of their core competencies that this team recognizes being critical to the success of the role, is like number 1. Those are all of the candidates and how they fared. So can everybody see that? Can you see those 5? The next one was influencing others. So you run this report and you can see that actually all of these candidates are pretty solid. Like they fall within they fall within actually the average population. And some are a little bit closer to that 9 than others. So Jenny looks like she's sort of the running favorite. But having the discussion, the debrief of this comparison report is pretty critical, because you might say that like Jenny's the strong contender, but second to Jenny is, let's say Debbie, but Debbie's values and experience are pretty strong. Like that's the stuff that we start sort of debating and discussing, like, okay, this person coachable, can we work this into the professional development plan? But really, again, this process of being like, okay, what does this report tell us about these candidates is really a great part of the hiring process, is having that debate. And like full disclosure, like you're never going to find the perfect candidate. Sorry to say, like I love benchmarking, as you know, but we're never going to have the perfect candidate. But what this does is that once we do find the candidate, we can run a Gaap report, which says, okay, here is where, if again, you look in the bottom right-hand side, like this is a snapshot of how this candidate looks for this report. The blue is like where they lined up perfectly. The red is where we need some work. And so we can hone in our coaching and our development into those areas right out of the gate to say, this is where this role needs you to sort of raise the bar. The final piece, and Candace and I had a really great discussion about this before we spoke. We don't want to create any confusion here, but like the final piece is that like you've made the hire, you've run your Gaap report, you made the hire, then you would activate your onboarding process. Now, your onboarding process is going to be very different for everybody, but what we know to be true is that a lot of our clients would say we can probably do a better job with our onboarding process. So this benchmark, this Gaap report would form part of what I like to call like a performance management plan. Like, what's their playbook? Like, what's their 30, 60, 90-day playbook? Well, the assessment, the Gaap report would fall into that. Plus, as I would also include like 30, 60, 90-day goals. But that now is activating another process. So we've run through the benchmarking process all the way through to hiring. Once we've made the hire, now we're moving into our onboarding process, which has this piece of like a performance management plan, a part of it. Questions, comments so far? We've really like just whipped through this so quickly. If there's there's more, but if there's any part of this sort of framework that you have questions about, like, put your hand up. Let me know.
Or I'm curious, especially as we look back at the involvement of the subject matter experts, I'd love to hear how and where you involve subject matter experts in some of the ways that we talked about. And I see that Debbie has raised her hand.
So let's park your inquiry and move over to Debbie's question. Yeah, Debbie.
For a role that is new to an organization, who do you consider to be the subject matter experts?
Great question. I'm going to be annoying and put it back at you. What's your approach? What do you think? Debbie?
Well, I know what I would do. I'm curious as to what you would do. So, in my experience, if there's a net new role, it's because someone's being overworked or something is not being done, or there's some other pressures that are being felt within the organization. And you would bring a group of people together to discuss those gaps and overlaps, and together brainstorm about what responsibilities this role should take on and how it needs to integrate with all the other roles, and sort of leverage their experiences. Although they may not be a subject matter expert for the new role, they have some insights into what that new role should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're bang on. I think involving the person who's feeling overworked is critical. And I think if you can have an HR person sit down with them, as you said, to sort of like figure out where are they excelling and where might they be falling behind, I would argue we could probably find their strengths and weaknesses in the behavior assessment. And quite often what I will say is like, you need your partner in crime, you need your opposite to be balancing out the work. That's I'm making a huge assumption, but commonly that's what I would see happening, is that we want to play to that person's strengths and figure out what their weaknesses are, and use that as a starting point for a conversation. Obviously, I would also include anybody else that would touch that role, anybody that person would be working with, anybody that's invested, like an invested stakeholder. Candace, anything else to add? Like anything new or different than what I said?
I just think that you've raised such an important piece. So I know you were asking who are the subject matter experts in the net new role, but you also referenced that, sometimes these roles are created because of some other problems. And so, this key accountabilities template exercise can help you to open up some of those conversations. And so there can be some byproduct conversations that can be really helpful to surface this. Okay, if we're creating this because there was burnout over here, is there anything else that we need to be looking at more holistically?
Debbie, what do you think? Anything, what's popping for you as we're talking? What? Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I don't know that anything you said is different than what I was thinking. So that's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Validates what you're thinking. So keep going. Yep. Candace, what was your question originally about?
Oh, I was just curious about how or in what ways you currently involve your subject matter experts in your hiring.
Do you involve them?
Do you? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. I've been working with this kind of framework for about 20 years. And so I'm now working within a social enterprise sector, social impact. And really what it is the more senior roles. A lot of the social entrepreneurs are very passionate about what they do. And it's typically a one-person show until they're almost ready to break. And then they recognize that they need to bring in someone else. And so it's more of an assessment of what the leader wants to do and likes to do, play to their strengths, and get as much off their desk as we possibly can, and then start doing some functional gathering of what can be done here, what can be done elsewhere, and then create a job description and things from there.
That's great. That's great. What about anybody else? Is anybody else using subject matter experts to create their benchmarks or even sort of some key accountabilities? Awesome. So there's Kenny. I see you leaning in, Kenny. Were you going to say something? No? You're on mute.
No, my lean in is just attentive listening.
Oh, I like attentive listening. Okay, so awesome. So I hope that idea, I mean, I know some of the pushback that I get is like, we're too busy. Like we can't sit down around a table and like hammer this out. And I do think like at the end of the day, that's the difference between being able to focus on urgent work and important work. Because when we can create alignment and clarity around this key accountabilities template, we are saving ourselves time down the road. That this falls into the important category, and someone needs to facilitate it, someone needs to keep us on track, but that we do hammer it out so that you think we're hiring to help. I might think we're hiring to help me with my load, whereas the CEO might think we're hiring because like we want to offer a completely new offering. So we really need to slow down to create that alignment. I think that was a great question, Candace. What other questions do you guys might have? Anything maybe around assessments? So any of you using, I know the ones of you that have our assessment, are any of you using other assessments in your hiring process? Yeah, Brianne, you're shaking your head. What assessment are you using? How are you
We're using a predictive index. Yeah.
Great.
So but you know, with the craziness of recruiting right now, I actually feel like we have stopped using it as much as we were in the past. And as we're sitting here having this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, why have I stopped using it? Like what triggered that? So
Yeah.
I think it's time to make sure that makes its way back into the process.
Yeah. Do you know if it has its own sort of benchmarking tool? Does it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Anybody else using some form of an assessment tool to help them in their hiring process? No, yes, no. Okay. So what I want you guys to do now is I want you to sort of share what is standing out for you today as most important. You know, as Brianne just said, like we have an assessment tool, we're not using it. Maybe we should go back and see how this process, I mean, obviously I'm promoting the tool that we use, but there's a lot out there. So how would that process look like using that other tool? So what I'd love for you guys to do right now is maybe just pop into the chat again, what's sticking out to you as important? What's sticking out to you as meaningful? We need to slow down and bring subject matter experts together. We need to take more time filling out this key accountability matrix. We don't even have accountabilities in our organization. Maybe we should start there. What is showing up as meaningful? So take a couple minutes, write it down, and then I want to pop it into the chat. Debbie. Key responsibilities, core competencies, and cultural fit are what we focus on. Great. That really is an important message to sort of continue to sort of lean into when we're hiring. Yeah, Brianne, comparison reports. We would compare, comparison reports are really powerful because you can use them obviously in your benchmark. You're going to compare that candidate to the unicorn benchmark. But for example, yesterday I ran a comparison report between two employees who are sort of experiencing conflict. And it's a great way to help people look at the data of who each other are and talk about like what's important to you, what's important to me, how do we communicate more effectively. So leaning into any sort of comparison report. It's also, again, going back to that wheel, we've got the Gaap report. This would move more into the onboarding category, is when we have a new hire starting, we run a comparison report between that hire and their boss, their direct report, so that goes into their onboarding process, and that they sit down and they have this conversation with their boss to say, what do you need to know about me? You know what I mean? So using it not just in times of conflict, but also in onboarding and like what I call designing the alliance when we start that relationship. I'm just reading some more of anything popping for you here in the comments, Candace, as I was talking?
Just good stuff around like walking the talk, walk the walk, walk the talk, and slowing down. You know, the thing is, I often say, as I'm sure, you know, we all have our little isms, but we're going to spend the time either way. So we either spend it upfront doing some good process and doing some, you know, and taking our time, or we're going to spend the time dealing with the bad hire, or trying to fill the gap because, you know, because we didn't do that work up front. And so I'm just a big believer that like the net of it all is that you're going to spend the time either way.
Yeah. Definitely a point. I think like a theme that's sort of coming through is like, today might be like a reminder to like review your processes. Hey, Kenny, hey, Brianne, like a call to be like, hey, we've been like drinking from water, like a fire hose. We actually do have a process for this, but how do we bring it back? How do we bring it back so that we can actually move more into the important work and not be drinking from a water hose?
In our defense, we have been hiring a lot of students and part-time workers, and so
Okay.
that's not necessarily, they're not here for that long, and like co-ops and
No.
stuff. So sometimes that's a lot of steps to take for someone that's going to be here for a short amount of time.
And you know what, that's a really good point. Something that I didn't think we were going to have time to get into deep. Like, this is like a pretty robust process, and we want to really use it for those key hires, like those really, really important roles. But like a cheap and cheerful version of this process is truly just completing that key accountabilities template and then running reports. So like you already know in your brain, like what we decided, like we don't need to create the magical unicorn. Like we want to create the magical unicorn when it is a massive role, like a big role to the organization. But doing the template with a couple of people, we don't have to create the unique unicorn. I would recommend that we just still run a few of the assessments, maybe the most basic version of the assessment, and then we can quickly compare. Do we have the right person? So running the comparison reports and the Gaap reports is a beautiful, beautiful step in the process. But if we are under fire and we're just hiring like front level managers or students, we can probably do it by just using the template. Does that make sense? The difference between the two of what I just described? Awesome. Okay, let me just quickly, I think another place where people can fall short with the assessment, especially in hiring, is that the candidate might do the assessment, but then they're never debriefed on the assessment. I'm getting a lot of head nods here. Yeah. So we might use it as a part of the hiring process. Whether or not we benchmarked it, that's a whole other conversation. But that the candidate actually might not never be shown it. So that's an area where I challenge you to develop a process and a strategy around that, because it is so powerful, as we've already talked about, as a tool for creating that professional development, a communication tool, conflict resolution tool. This is great. Fantastic. So if you guys do find yourself needing some help in this process, Candace and I are more than happy to help you. I think if you were to do it with us once, you'd be off and running on your own and be able to do it on your own. What's sort of critical about what we're offering here is that it's the interpretation of the reports. So the facilitation of all the subject matter experts to get that information into the computer, that can actually be quite a heavy lift. That's about a 2-hour process of creating the unicorn report. And then also interpreting the report. That is really important part of the process too. Like I was saying, like, I can't remember the names, but Debbie was the front runner, but Jenny is second, is like really talking and coaching people through that process to sort of see, okay, this is the person that we want to hire. And then the last step, which we actually didn't connotate in hours, is a 2-hour debrief. So that what I said before, a lot of companies use it to hire, but then they never get debriefed on it. We can debrief that person's report and work with them to create a professional development plan that they can then turn around and use in that sort of onboarding conversation with the key hire. So that's just an offering that we're happy to share with you. If you have any questions about that, let us know. This is not central to this discussion. Like really what's central is what's showing up for you. Where are you sort of like being reminded, hey, we need to slow down and pay attention to this. I'm just wanting to read a comment. I think Debbie's comment here, recruitment. Yeah, what did she said, Candice? What did Debbie say?
So just that sometimes, even if you do all the right things, it still doesn't work out.
Yeah.
and probation is a critical time, which actually makes the case for that's, I think it was step number 9, Carolyn, around that onboarding piece. So often, so part of the robust conversation that Carolyn and I had was just that, so many people think onboarding is about making sure everybody has their logins and their laptops. And they completely miss that chance to really set expectations, figure out where were some of those gaps that maybe showed up in the interviews, and and having some really clear and kind conversations around what some potential gaps might be. So rather than just sitting back, crossing our arms and going, like, let's see if they perform on this or not, maybe they'll surprise us. Like, how can we use those assessments during the probationary period to really see, what's maybe a skill issue that we could just like close, or what can a little coaching help to solve, or just how can we help people to be successful. But Debbie's point is, make sure you use that probationary period well. Did I sum that up okay, Debbie?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What I coach for sometimes to bring the point home is you've got 3 to 6 months, however long you want to give them. You have that period of time to determine whether you're going to keep them forever or give them back. And by forever, I mean you can't hire them or fire them. So yes, it really gets people focused on, oh, I got to figure out whether this is going to work or not in the first 3 months. And because otherwise it's like, oh, geez, look, their 3-month probation's coming up. I wonder how they've been doing. And that's way too late.
Yeah.
Great point. Nikki, I want to put you on the spot because you've been really using the assessments a lot lately. You've been doing your own debriefs. You and I have had some conversations about candidates and where we might see some red flags. Like, now that you're further along with it, like, what are you noticing? What are you noticing? What might be relevant to share?
The debriefs we're using, the disc profiling or the DNA assessments we're using for sure throughout our recruitment process.
Hold on one second. We're getting some feedback. Is there someone else in your group? Hold on. Let's try that. Keep going. No?
Is that better?
No. Shoot. But we'll just go for it. Go for it.
We're using the debriefs in our recruitment process, but we're only using them for our final candidates. So we don't actually do the assessment beforehand, figure out how the debriefs are going to help us. We just make it, and then we learn a little bit more about them and go ahead anyway. So I think what's resonating for me the most is when we benchmarking.
Can I, Nikki, I want to share that we did get 1 or 2 assessments where I was like, I've never seen this before. This is a red flag. Can I?
100%. We've had 3 of them where I think each 3 times you sat down with someone from Organica and went, I don't know about this fit, and we've gone, it's fine, they're the right fit, they're the right candidate, we know what we're getting ourselves into. And all 3 times they didn't make it through their probationary period. So I think for us, DISC debriefing, the driving forces and the competencies has been crucial in understanding our team and being able to communicate better within the teams, but we're not using it as effectively during the recruitment process.
Thanks for sharing that point, because that really was like, even in my interactions with Nikki at Organica, like, it was just like, we saw these assessments that were real outliers, and there was this desire to make it work. And I understand that. I don't know that you might have changed it, but like, when you see an outlier, you see the outlier, and that can be the red flag, as Debbie was sort of like speaking to really pay attention to this person in the next 90 days. So guys, thanks for joining us today. Like I said, we move fast and furious. We will send you our little model. I think what was key is the use of an assessment tool to sort of extrapolate that DNA from the behavior, from what's important to them, from their core competencies. What also is really important that I really want to make sure that you guys hear is that you slow down to really map out what does the job require by completing that key accountabilities template. Take it, edit it, make it your own, like add what you want, leave what you don't, but slow down to make that a part of your hiring process. And then, yeah, if we can help you in debriefing any assessments or sort of reading anything, like, don't hesitate to reach out just in the short term of getting yourself going. Like, Nikki has taken this on like a champion, and I think she's seeing, that wouldn't speak for you, Nikki, but she's seeing some really great results by really making it a stronger part of her process. So a couple of upcoming events: the Art of Gathering, totally different topic than what we're talking about. But what's really hitting home for me in this book is really locking in the why of everything that we do, every meeting, every networking event, every sales, like really locking in that why and locking in who needs to be there, and some new and different ideas to start embedding into your gatherings, whether they be professional or personal. So a bit of a different book than what we normally read. And then, yeah, like Candace and I want to get into the onboarding conversation. Like, we realize it's such a personal topic, and so many of you guys are already subject matter experts on the topic, but that's what this space is all about. It's about hitting the pause button for a second to say, well, what else is being done out there? What could I be doing better? And even leaning into each other on these calls to say, hey, Nikki, how are you using those assessments? Or, hey, Debbie, you've been at this for 20 years. Like, what are you seeing? We like to build community. We like to build a network of just like people who can support each other. So the signups for that will be in the newsletter. So yeah, so thanks so much, you guys. We do have 5 minutes. I'm so impressed at how quickly we've been able to blow through. If you do have any questions, just fire away, or otherwise have a wonderful day. I think summer is coming to Vancouver.
Thanks, Carolyn.